Hey guys, tonight we're taking you somewhere warm, rhythmic, and just a little smoky. You're waking up inside the walls of 16th century Benin City, yes, that Benin, the legendary walled capital of the Edo people, tucked into what is now southern Nigeria. It's early morning, and the sky is still caught between indigo and gold. A rooster crows somewhere distantly, probably just to remind everyone it's about to be outperformed by an entire drumline of palace musicians. You're not alone, either. Around you, woven mats roll up, and servants begin their day with quiet murmurs. The scent of charcoal has already begun to drift in through the intricately carved wooden shutters. You sit up slowly, brushing off the fine layer of red dust clinging to your wrapper, and realize you are very far from your usual breakfast cereal. Spoiler, you probably wouldn't survive this world for long. Between the ceremonial etiquette, the social expectations, and the pepper level in the stew alone, you'd be toast before noon. But tonight, you're just here to drift through it, not stress about your spice tolerance. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere halfway across the world, let me know where you are and what time it is in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little storytelling reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink into the sun-blushed courtyard, still wrapped in sleep. Somewhere nearby, a cluster of talking drums mimics human speech. You can't understand the phrases, but the rhythm is both polite and authoritative, likely some sort of morning announcement. Perhaps the Oba has decreed something. Or perhaps it's just the breakfast bell, in its own resounding way. Around you, terracotta walls shimmer with heat that hasn't even arrived yet. The Great Moat of Benin hums faintly in the distance, patrolled not by crocodiles this time, but by the unseen forces of ceremony and silence. This is a city built on ritual. Its walls are thick, not only with earth and bamboo but with protocol. As you stand up and stretch, you spot the first sign of what's to come, a line of barefoot young kitchen boys carrying bundles of wood, balanced expertly on heads without hands. They slip through the side gate and vanish into the royal kitchen enclosure, a thatched compound that smells of old smoke, warm oil, and mysterious spice. The day is about to begin. And you have the rare privilege of simply observing. You trudge forward slowly, your feet making that soft brushing sound only dust can produce. On your way, you pass a row of brass plaques embedded along the palace walkway. They shimmer in the low sun, each one depicting a slice of royal life: warriors in leopard skins, Portuguese traders bearing gifts, servants with high platters held over their heads. You notice something odd in one of the carvings, a man presenting what looks suspiciously like a chicken on a stick. Yes. Historians still argue whether these were merely ceremonial offerings or part of actual feasting scenes. Either way, it's comforting to know that grilled things on sticks have always had a place at fancy tables. Turning a corner, you catch a whiff of fermented locust beans, the unmistakable smell of IRU, beloved by many, feared by newcomers. Think strong cheese, but earthier. And stickier. The air carries it along with the scent of yam flour and the unmistakable pop of palm oil meeting hot iron. Someone nearby coughs lightly, a respectful, muffled sound. You glance over and spot an elderly woman squatting beside a small earthen oven, fanning the fire with a folded palm frond. Her pot bubbles as she hums softly. You don't recognize the tune, but it lulls you into something like calm. You look up. A red kite circles lazily overhead. Someone is sweeping the palace walkways with a bundle of twigs. You rub your arms, not from cold, but from the strange anticipation that comes with being very, very far from home, and knowing you don't need to do anything except watch and breathe. A young girl passes by carrying a calabash bowl. Inside is something thick, white, and steaming. It's oji, a fermented cornmeal porridge. Possibly sour. Possibly sweet. Depends who made it and how much honey or ground melon seed got tossed in. Breakfast here is not one fixed menu. It's a quiet orchestration. A soft pageant of bubbling, stirring, and balancing. You hear the click of beads against brass. Someone important just walked past. No one lifts their head. More people arrive. You count at least 20 different people moving through the kitchen paths now. Some are slicing tubers, others carrying gourds filled with palm sap. One man is hunched over a giant mortar, rhythmically pounding something into paste. The sound is steady, like a heart. A breeze stirs the fabric canopy over the compound. It smells like smoke, pepper, and roasted plantain. Somewhere nearby, a parrot shrieks what sounds like an insult. The guard station nearby mutters a reply. You're not sure who won. The sun climbs higher. The hum of the palace becomes a low drone. As you lean against a carved pillar, you spot a group of boys fanning embers under a pile of iron pots. One pot has been patched with 3 different metals. One is shiny, possibly European tin. Trade leaves its mark in the most practical places. You watch as the boys open a pot lid the size of a drum top. Steam hisses out, curling like a ghost. Inside, a thick yam pottage dotted with red oil and goat meat. Not chunks, shreds. Soft, stringy, and rich. You breathe in. Your stomach doesn't growl. It sighs. In the corner, a woman starts roasting plantains over an open grate. They char perfectly, blackening just enough to split at the seams and ooze that warm caramel scent. She places them in a shallow basket and fans them once with a folded leaf. No seasoning. No tricks. Just fire and time. An elder walks slowly past you. He pauses, squinting at your borrowed robe, then nods once. Approval, or maybe just politeness. He lifts a narrow stick and points at a strange object beside the fire, a mound of brown paste shaped like a dome. Yam, he says, but then adds, not just yam. Heart yam. You have no idea what that means, but you nod like it's the wisest thing you've heard all day. Someone offers you a small bowl of warm water to rinse your hands. Another drops a single cola nut into your palm, a gesture of welcome and maybe expectation. You nibble it and immediately regret it. Bitter doesn't even begin to describe it. It tastes like someone dared a tree to become coffee and failed. As the courtyard buzzes, the city beyond stirs more slowly. The markets have not yet opened. The Oba hasn't yet spoken. But the kitchen is alive. And you are here, drifting among firelight, fragrant wood smoke, and the soft music of morning. The parrot swears again. The guard pretends not to hear. The sun lifts slowly above the thatched roofs of Benin City, painting everything in warm bronze. You stand now near the outer kitchens, where breakfast becomes more than just sustenance, it becomes spectacle. You're close to the royal dining complex, a cluster of shaded courtyards and quiet verandas where nobles gather not merely to eat, but to reaffirm their importance with each bite. You wouldn't dare sit at one of those tables. No, you hover like a feather caught in a sunbeam, drifting silently past steaming pots and salt-splashed benches. You're here to observe, to eavesdrop on the secrets of royal breakfast. And speaking of secrets, you finally catch sight of something you've been chasing since dawn, the nobleman's plate. He's seated cross-legged on a low, carved stool inlaid with ivory. His robe gleams with coral beads and deep indigo fabric, his wrists heavy with brass cuffs. His breakfast? Balanced on a wide, flat tray made of polished wood. There's a small clay bowl of bean paste, akra, mashed black-eyed peas whipped and fried in palm oil until fluffy on the inside, crisp on the edges. They shimmer gold like little pillows of pride. Beside the akra is a chunk of boiled yam, still steaming, a deep crack running through its soft white flesh. He tears off a piece and dips it into a puddle of reddish oil glistening with pepper seeds. You wince instinctively. That oil could wake a ghost. But he eats it with perfect calm, eyes half-lidded like he's contemplating the secrets of the cosmos, or just trying to survive the pepper rush. And then you spot something you hadn't expected: smoked fish. Not just any fish, though. This one is fanned open, its skin darkened to the color of tree bark. You catch its scent before its shape: sharp, briny, ancient. A taste of the river, preserved over fire and time. The noble chews slowly, lips not quite moving, posture absolutely still. Breakfast, here, is a performance. One crumb dropped the wrong way could be a minor scandal. Nearby, his attendants watch with mild tension. Not because he's difficult, but because every movement must be mirrored in preparation for the Oba's table. Yes, everything done here, every bowl, every seasoning pinch, is a warm-up for the king's meal, which is prepared in total silence, behind high walls, by women trained for 10 years in the art of perfect food. Your gaze drifts to one of the junior nobles further down the row. His tray has something different: a greenish paste, wrapped in a banana leaf and steaming slightly. You lean in. Is it snail stew? Indeed it is. Chunky, chewy river snails slow-cooked with bitter leaves and thickened with crushed melon seeds. The paste has a slick, velvety shine, and when he opens the leaf, a plume of herby vapor escapes. The scent is both strange and comforting, earthy, like fresh rain on hot soil. You can't decide if it smells like food or like memory. Behind him, a servant girl tiptoes in with a gourd full of aguro, a light palm wine. Not strong, not for drunkenness, just for digestion. That's the story, anyway. The noble tips a bit into his wooden cup and sips quietly. No expression. You begin to wonder if it's secretly a competition: who can chew the slowest, drink the softest, breathe the least? You slip past another group of trays, this one more modest, likely belonging to lesser courtiers or scribes. Their meal is simpler: crushed yam with a sprinkle of dried shrimp powder, and a sour-tasting broth dotted with okra seeds. One of them laughs softly, breaking the quiet. The others glance at him like he's just committed mild heresy. You crouch beside the wooden post of a pavilion, letting your fingers trail through the dust. You listen. Every sound is purposeful: the soft thump of a pestle, the wet hiss of a ladle meeting hot broth, the faint scrape of gourds shifting on a tray. Then you catch something: a faint argument between two cooks in the background. Something about missing locust beans. One swears she'd placed them in the yam stew, the other says no, she saw her give them to the palm nut soup boy. You smile. Even in royal kitchens, breakfast drama is eternal. Historians still argue whether nobles prepared their own breakfast condiments, spice pastes, crushed nuts, pounded herbs, or whether these were standardized by kitchen caste. The reality was likely both: high-ranking families had signature tastes. Garlic steeped in palm oil, tamarind mashed with charcoal salt, dried crayfish pulverized to dust and stirred into oji. Culinary identity was a badge of honor. You notice something peculiar near the far end of the breakfast lane: a kind of porridge with cracked millet, studded with orange specks. Is that baobab seed? You've read about it: tangy, slightly sour, rich in calcium. But here it's been cooked into a thick gruel and topped with ground pumpkin seed. The man eating it is older, his teeth worn, his eyes sharp. He eats like he's solving a puzzle, spoon after spoon. A child runs by with a tray held precariously above his head. It's sloshing, something creamy and white. Fermented milk? Possibly. The nobility here had access to the spoils of wide trade routes: milk from Fulani herders, spices from Saharan merchants, even exotic peppers traded through Portuguese contacts. You're not sure what's in that bowl, but you're pretty sure it came a long way. Suddenly, the drums start again, faster this time. Not chaotic, but rhythmic enough to signal the Oba's approach. All the nobles immediately stop eating. Some chew faster. Others swallow quickly and arrange their trays just so. You, wisely, back into a corner. The Oba does not eat here. He eats alone, in a sanctum of ceremonial quiet. But his appearance, even a distant one, halts all other digestion. His diet is partly political. Every bite he takes is supervised, even sanctified. You imagine him now, seated behind curtains woven of coral and silk, receiving his breakfast with 5 layers of protocol. And what does he eat? That's the question, isn't it? Rumor says he prefers fresh catfish steamed in banana leaves, served with bitter leaf soup and a thin yam porridge so smooth you could drink it. But no one outside his inner chamber can confirm. Maybe he has a sweet tooth. Maybe he hates OG. You laugh softly at the thought. Immediately, a servant nearby glares at you, startled by a sound no one expected. You mime a cough. The moment passes. Your thoughts wander again to the tray with snail stew, and how casually it had been unwrapped, almost as if it were nothing. But here, every leaf is a secret. Every aroma, a message. As the nobles resume eating, now with slightly more restraint, you lean back against a wall, letting the warm air settle around you like a second robe. A man walks past holding a platter carved from ivory, empty but polished to a shine. He hums a tune under his breath. It sounds like something old. Something soft. There's a bowl of fried dough balls near your foot now, left by someone who got called away. You resist. Barely. They smell of nutmeg and toasted grain. You imagine them dipped in hot palm syrup. Your stomach pouts. But you don't touch them. Instead, you drift upward, metaphorically speaking. You rise above the breakfast scene like incense. You see the nobles scattered across the courtyard, bowls balanced, heads bowed. You see the palace kitchens behind them, chimneys whispering thin threads of smoke. You see the sprawl of Benin City beyond, winding roads, red soil, thatched roofs, and 1,000 smaller breakfasts happening in 1,000 smaller homes. You float there, full of sense, sound, and quiet surprise. You're still hovering above that vast, sunlit network of thatched roofs and echoing courtyards, the scent of roasted grains and crushed pepper clinging to the air. But now, your focus drifts, gently, like smoke in a lazy wind, away from the high courtyards of the nobles and toward the pulsing arteries of trade that made their breakfast even possible. Because here's the truth, nobody eats like a noble without an empire feeding them. You touch down now on the red-dusted earth of the outer markets, still within the walls of Benin City, but far enough from the royal palaces that the mood shifts. The chatter here is lively, the pace quick, and the food? Infinitely more diverse than you imagined. While the nobles sip palm wine under silk awnings, this is where breakfast starts, on the backs of women balancing woven trays, and the hands of young apprentices grinding millet before the sun fully rises. The market opens with a soundscape, the thunk of pestles and mortar, the swish of cloth as vendors rearrange their wares, the high-pitched call of a pepper seller advertising a just-plucked batch that could water your eyes from 50 paces. You pass a woman with tiny smoked crabs displayed on palm leaves. She's fanning them against flies, but you'd bet half your dream soul they're not for lunch, they're for condiments. Yes, some of those noble breakfasts were flavored with crushed crab paste stirred into their OG or soup base. It's not a garnish, it's a signature. You step around a stack of dried melon seeds wrapped in twisted leaves like little scrolls. One of the oldest attendants here picks one up and crumbles it between her fingers to test the oil. Too dry, she mutters. Only good for servants. She doesn't see you, of course not, but you smirk at her precision. This, too, is power. Historians still argue whether Benin imported certain flavor staples, like grains of paradise or North African saffron, or cultivated analogues locally with their own spice gardens. What's clear, though, is that even breakfast was global. Through merchant caravans, river routes, and Portuguese docks, the city's elites had access to salt from the Sahara, dates from across the Sahel, and, very controversially, sugar. Now that was a rare treat, and not the clean, snowy white powder you might imagine. Sugar then came in chunks, unrefined and slightly bitter, sometimes carried wrapped in goatskin. Only the highest-ranking nobles could afford it. Sometimes, it was grated over hot yam for a breakfast so lavish it bordered on bragging. But sugar was just one indulgence. There were hundreds more. Consider this: you pass a booth stacked with dried hibiscus calyx, bright red and crinkled like velvet petals. Most people use them for tea, sour, deep, refreshing. But one kitchen near the western gate steeps them in warm water, blends them with fermented millet, and serves it in the early morning with toasted locust bean flour. A kind of morning tonic. And maybe, just maybe, you saw something like it on a noble's tray earlier. In the next row, a child is turning a slow spit over hot coals. On the skewer is something squat, roasted to a deep mahogany. You pause. Lizard? No, wait. It's monitor tail. Some nobles believed its fat had energizing properties when mixed with yam mash and chili. Not common. Not even necessarily enjoyable. But prestige meals are rarely about comfort. You pass a few women seated beside wide earthen bowls of oji, fermented millet or sorghum porridge, silky and tangy. Their oji is special, thickened slightly and topped with smoked shrimp oil and hand-ground peanut powder. You watch one customer mix it slowly, counterclockwise, as tradition demands. The rhythm is almost medita. A man walks by carrying baskets strung on both sides of a pole balanced across his shoulder. In one basket? Banana leaves. In the other? Live snails. Large, glossy, and slightly annoyed. You watch them try to escape the confines of breakfast, but it's no use. They'll be stewed in bitter leaf, seasoned with yuzaisa, and served to someone who probably won't even look down while chewing. You drift further, following the sound of a drum, only it's not a drum. It's a hollowed-out gourd being pounded to separate its pulp from seeds. The woman doing it hums a tune that sounds like a lullaby and breakfast prayer combined. She stops to adjust her head wrap, then continues pounding, the gourd vibrating like a soft heart. As the scent of roasted maize begins to rise, you notice a peculiar little shack, slightly off to the side. It's covered in charms, cowrie shells, feathers, folded leaves tied with string. Inside, an old man prepares a breakfast you've never seen before: smoked frog legs and pepper broth, served with a side of crushed baobab and a spoon carved from bone. He's not a priest, but he's not one either. He serves his meal to warriors seeking favor before campaign. It's breakfast as protection. And then there are the breakfast sellers who travel, young girls with long braids carrying woven trays balanced expertly on their heads. On those trays are moin moin, steamed bean cakes, spicy fried yam strips, and palm oil muffins dotted with fermented locust beans. One passes through the noble courtyards every morning, and though the trays are meant for guards and attendants, you'd be surprised how often a noble just happens to be nearby. You pass a corner where women are frying dough rings in open iron pans. They crackle as they hit the oil, their scent a mix of grain and nutmeg. One woman sprinkles ground pepper over hers before they're even out of the pan. To wake the mouth, she says to no one in particular. And wake it they do. Because here in Benin, breakfast isn't light or forgettable. It's layered. Fermented. Smoked. Fried. It's a way to display wealth, to soothe the stomach, to greet the ancestors, and sometimes to win political favor. Share a breakfast dish with the right person, and you've practically signed an alliance. You loop back around to the entrance of the market, where a boy is setting out tiny bundles of roasted locusts, crunchy, protein-packed, slightly smoky. You remember seeing something similar on a noble's tray, dusted with powdered pepper and presented on a carved leaf platter. It wasn't the main dish. It was the amuse-bouche. A breakfast snack. You chuckle to yourself. Imagine having a breakfast starter before your breakfast. And then, just as you're ready to leave the market, a new smell cuts through everything. Sweet, rich, slightly nutty. You follow it to a woman ladling hot coconut custard into banana leaf cups. She sprinkles the top with sesame and says softly, "For wise mouths." You're not sure what that means, but you hope it applies to you. The sun is higher now. Breakfast is winding down. Some vendors begin packing up. The ogi has been stirred. The yams have been sold. The nobles are finishing their last sips of palm wine or hibiscus tonic. And somewhere behind those red palace walls, the Oba's final breakfast tray has been cleared. But for you, full of smells and stories, the meal has just begun. You've walked the kitchens, crouched by royal stools, floated over markets, and followed trails of pepper and palm oil. You've seen snails and frogs, melon seeds and smoked fish, sugar and locusts, all woven together into the quiet theater of Benin's noble breakfast. And now, belly full of imaginary yam and peanut dust, you step into the shadows of the royal archives. Because if you thought the food was complex, wait until you see how breakfast rules were enforced. You linger now in the shade of a carved colonnade, not far from the Oba's private courtyard, though still, of course, unseen. The morning is well underway, but in the slow rhythm of Benin's elite, the day doesn't gallop forward so much as stretch like a cat, luxuriously, unhurriedly, and with great attention to ritual. And you're about to discover something curious, not just what nobles ate for breakfast, but how they were allowed to eat it. Because here in the Kingdom of Benin, food wasn't just nourishment. It was hierarchy. And breakfast, that most private and consistent of meals, was surprisingly regulated. You pass a small open-sided chamber, where a middle-aged steward sits on a mat, hunched over a tablet of cowhide. He's recording something with a reed dipped in palm dye. A servant approaches and murmurs quietly. The steward nods, makes a mark, and waves the boy away. You float closer. His record? Not taxes. Not royal orders. He's tallying menus. Not in the sense of choosing dishes, but in the sense of tracking what breakfast dishes were served, where, and to whom. You blink. Apparently, breakfast surveillance is real. Why? Because status could be measured in menu. Eat what's not befitting your title, and you risk embarrassment. Or worse, accusation of ambition. That's right. In this city, you don't just wear your rank, you eat it. The rules aren't posted. They live in the heads of people like this steward and 100 others stationed across noble compounds. You imagine a noblewoman requesting extra groundnut oil for her yam. Seems harmless. But if it's the type reserved for royal wives? Scandal. Breakfast gate. She might get away with it once, twice. But thrice? The Oba might hear. Historians still argue whether these food hierarchies were officially decreed or silently enforced through generational etiquette. Some believe there were oral menu codes passed down by stewards. Others say that punishment came not from laws, but from collective side-eye, an informal but deadly system of culinary shame. You pass a pavilion where one noble's breakfast is being delivered on 5 separate trays, each carried by a different attendant. The first has yam mash wrapped in fresh banana leaves. The second, roasted bush meat. The third? A tiny bowl of something red and glossy, perhaps spiced cola paste. The fourth holds a carved gourd cup of palm wine. But it's the fifth that catches your eye, a single boiled egg, sitting in a carved ivory holder. An egg. Simple. Humble. But boiled whole, something only the Oba, his blood relatives, and select high chiefs were permitted to receive. You glance at the attendant. She knows. She's walking slowly. Carefully. Because this egg is more than protein, it's a status symbol. Give it to the wrong person, and you're not just ruining breakfast. You're committing culinary tea. And what happens then? Well, if you're lucky, it's confiscated quietly. You're offered a different dish. The mistake is chalked up to youthful ignorance or a confused servant. If you're not lucky, you're called before a council, asked why your tray contained the wrong broth. And depending on your answer, you might lose access to certain foods for life. There was once a nobleman, named Lost to Time, who asked for peppered duck on a weekday. That sounds innocent, doesn't it? But peppered duck was a ceremonial food, usually reserved for moon feasts or war commemorations. Asking for it on a Tuesday morning was like showing up to brunch in full battle regalia. And yet, he insisted. Twice. On the third request, his breakfast arrived with boiled plantain instead. No duck. No explanation. The message was clear: you are not who you think you are. Now, you might wonder, did anyone rebel against these rules? Of course. There were the quiet rebels, nobles who tweaked their dishes just slightly. A different garnish here. An unauthorized spice there. You see one now, smirking as she dips cassava bread into a bowl that definitely smells like imported saffron. She doesn't offer it to guests. She eats alone. That's the trick: conceal your luxury within silence. Then there were the loud rebels, the ones who flouted convention and hosted breakfast feasts with dishes far above their station. These were rare. And often punished. Not with exile, but with silence. Invitations dry up. Servants are reassigned. Suddenly, no one's delivering eggs at all. One scholar even tells of a breakfast-related ghost story, a noble who dared to commission a breakfast dish known only to the Oba's personal priest. He claimed it was for educational purposes. The next morning, his home was found abandoned, food half-eaten, fire still burning. No sign of him. You smirk. Possibly exaggerated. Possibly not. But let's not get spooky. Let's get ceremonial. You pass into a courtyard near the palace's southern wing, where a line of servants is preparing breakfast for a royal ritual. Today's meal? A communal offering breakfast, meant to be shared among the nobles, then left partially uneaten as tribute to the ancestors. The dishes are mostly yam-based, because yam is sacred. There's also a goosey soup with charred onions and a garnish of smoked shrimp. A noble priestess performs a blessing over the pots. She dips a twig into one and flicks broth toward the east. Then the west. Then upward. You eat, she intones, but never alone. That's a key belief: food shared is power multiplied. But only when shared correctly. Eat from the wrong bowl, and that power? It turns on you. You float to the side, watching another nobleman being served from 3 different pots. Each pot represents something: clan lineage, political rank, and age. He tastes each, slowly, then nods. A servant announces, balance confirmed. It's not just breakfast. It's identity. You drift now through a gallery of painted panels. Each one depicts a noble at breakfast, surrounded by servants and attendants. One shows a woman eating yam with one hand, holding a fan in the other. Another shows a child being fed by his grandmother, his tray painted with symbols of the moon. Breakfast as inheritance. And speaking of inheritance, guess what was often passed down, generation to generation? Not just jewelry. Not just land. Recipes. Yes, specific family breakfast blends. Like the pepper oil mix used only for first sons. Or the 3-day fermented millet reserved for daughters on their marriage week. These were guarded secrets. In one case, a family hired a scribe to encode their breakfast recipes into poetry, so rivals couldn't steal the seasoning ratios. You reach the edge of the palace now, and a steward offers you something invisible, a symbolic dish of your own. Let's say it's a small bowl of oji, sprinkled with dried pawpaw and a dash of tiger nut cream. Custom. Modest. But with flair. You take a mental sip. Not bad. And just when you think you've seen it all, you're led down a quiet passage to the side of the Oba's library. A room where no food is ever served, but all meals are remembered. It's the Breakfast Codex, a collection of symbols, proverbs, and diagrams, painted across parchment and bark, recording centuries of morning meals. One panel reads, "He who eats the lion's yam must wear the lion's cloak." You're not sure what it means, but it sounds important. And just like that, breakfast's web of etiquette, politics, and symbolism reveals itself as the true meal of kings. A ritual of caution. A performance of identity. A ceremony you must eat with your head high, and your fork low. You slip now behind a curtain of woven raffia, the fibers still warm from the early sun, and find yourself in a quieter corner of the palace compound, a stretch of low earthen buildings, each painted in geometric ochre patterns. These, as it turns out, are not homes or storage rooms, but the palace kitchens. Or more accurately, a hive of kitchens. Here in the Kingdom of Benin, breakfast doesn't just appear, it emerges from an entire sub-economy of labor, lineage, and smoky artistry. And yes, your nostrils twitch immediately. The scent of roasted egusi, charred palm kernel, and something suspiciously sweet and funky hits your sinuses like a gentle slap. You're not mad. Let's begin here, with the women at the fire. The cooks of Benin's elite are mostly women, many of them part of guilds passed down through maternal lines. Their mothers cooked for nobles. Their grandmothers, perhaps, for the Oba himself. And they do not play. You hover over one as she carefully grinds roasted melon seeds with a stone roller. It's not the frantic, multitasky vibe of modern kitchens. No Gordon Ramsay energy here. This is rhythm. She moves in circles, like a song on repeat. Her helper, a girl maybe 12, stirs a bubbling pot with a carved wooden spoon that's clearly been used for decades. At least. You notice the firewood. It's not random. The wood is chosen based on the dish. Hardwood for soups. Softwood for grilled meats. One variety, called a kinwin, is prized for its breakfast smoke, a mellow, nutty aroma said to wake the spirit before the stomach. And then there's the quiet drama of oil. Palm oil is the lifeblood of most dishes here, but not all palm oil is created equal. The reddish-orange kind is used for everyday meals. But a golden, clarified version, processed in a long, whispery ritual, is reserved for breakfast dishes served to titled nobles. Why? Because clarity, in this case, equals purity. And you do not want to wake up to a murky sauce. That's practically a bad omen. You drift near the oil cauldron, where one elder stirs with what looks like a broomstick. She hums a song. Maybe it's a recipe. Maybe it's a warning. You can't tell. But she stops abruptly, lifts the stick, and flicks a single droplet onto a scrap of banana leaf. The girl beside her sniffs it, nods, and says, "Too sharp. Add pepper leaf ash." Ash. In your breakfast. And yes, it works. Historians still argue whether these kitchen rituals evolved from religious practice or were simply local science in disguise. Some say the use of ash, clay, and fermented ingredients came from ancestral food offerings, and the practice slowly moved into everyday use. Others think the line between sacred and savory was always blurry in Benin. You pass another corner where meat is being prepped. Not just any meat, bush meat, gathered by royal hunters and brought to the palace kitchens at dawn. This one's a civet, you think. Possibly antelope. Hard to say, honestly, everything smells like ginger and smoke by this point. Meat preparation here isn't about fat marbling or grill marks. It's about symbolism. Certain cuts are assigned to different ranks. The ribs might go to high priests. The thigh, to senior wives. Even the direction the meat is cut, north to south, east to west, can carry meaning. You watch as a cook slices diagonally and then turns the meat once before wrapping it and leaves. Why? Because the direction mirrors the rising sun. Breakfast must face the day. And let's not forget the starches. Yam, of course, is king. It's roasted, boiled, pounded, or mashed depending on the noble's lineage or recent accomplishments. A warrior returning from battle might be given yam with bitter leaf, a symbolic cleansing. A scholar? Yam with honey sauce and crushed sesame, to sweeten the mind. There's cassava too, though it's newer to the region, possibly arriving through contact with the Portuguese. At first, only curious cooks experimented with it. But now, among certain nobles, cassava-based fritters are a sign of modernity. You peek into one bowl and see dough speckled with chopped onion, chili, and something green, maybe scent leaf. The woman flicks tiny dollops into hot oil and they puff like sleepy clouds. She offers one to no one in particular. You take it, invisibly. It burns your non-existent fingers but is worth every spectral wince. Then you notice something unexpected, a spice rack. Okay, not a rack exactly, more like a gourd shelf lined with powders, pastes, and dried roots. Benin's spice game is strong, but not overwhelming. This is not about heat. It's about layers. Smoked fish powder. Crushed locust beans. Wild pepper. Dried lime. And a mysterious beige dust labeled only as dust from the fourth tree. You raise a ghostly eyebrow. Apparently, this fourth tree is a local name for a hardwood found near sacred groves. It's not poisonous, but not exactly food either. It's used to flavor porridge meant for ceremonies, or extremely hungover nobles. And yes, breakfast sometimes includes hangover cures. One favorite? A soup of fermented maize, catfish, and ground bitter cola, served with a thick chunk of salt-crusted yam. You can smell one brewing now, bubbling in a bronze pot that looks older than most countries. You float closer, and the cook leans over it and whispers, "If it doesn't sting your dreams, it won't wake your body." Poetic. And slightly terrifying. The kitchen compound hums with this quiet, orderly energy, each cook a dancer, each fire a drum. You pass a courtyard where young apprentices are learning the 3 breakfast dances, the motion used to stir, serve, and signal a dish is ready. The last one involves a rhythmic tapping of the serving spoon against the pot, tap, tap, pause, tap. It's not just functional. It's musical. In fact, every dish has a rhythm. A noblewoman once complained that her egusi soup sounded different and refused to eat it. The cook had forgotten the final tap. And now, the final stage, plating. In Benin, noble breakfasts aren't served on plain ceramic. No. Depending on your status, your breakfast might arrive on carved ivory, polished brass, decorated gourd, or even leaf-lined trays embossed with family crests. The most revered trays include symbols: a leopard for courage, a sunburst for wisdom, a snail for patience. You float toward a table where dishes are being arranged. Each item is placed clockwise. That's crucial. Clockwise for harmony. Counterclockwise for funerals. Oops. One new cook accidentally plates the plantains counterclockwise. The head cook gasps, rearranges them, and mutters something about inviting the wrong ancestors. The dish is reassembled. Peace is restored. And just when you think it's time to move on, a small side kitchen catches your eye. Less formal. Smaller fires. Younger cooks. And here, you smell something sweet. Ah, the experimental kitchen. This is where apprentice cooks try new combinations: pineapple and cola syrup, yam porridge with smoked cocoa pods, even a proto-biscuit made of ground cassava, baobab flour, and a dab of shea butter. The verdict is still out. Some nobles like innovation. Others grumble that modern yam has no memory. But you, floating, invisible, curious, take a bite. And yeah, it's weird. But it's breakfast. You step away from the glowing kitchens, your senses trailing behind like the curl of wood smoke in morning air. Ahead of you, the palace stirs in soft, lazy pockets of motion, gilded robes being shaken out, clay walls warmed by sunbeams, the hushed laughter of attendants. It's almost time for breakfast to be served. But the food itself is just one layer of the ritual. You're about to see how a 16th century Benin noble doesn't just eat breakfast, they perform it. Your first stop. The Awefa, or steward's antechamber. This is where each nobleman's personal steward reviews the morning's menu and makes final adjustments based on the noble's schedule, mood, and, if we're being honest, vanity. One steward frowns at a bowl of stew and mutters, "Too much ground crayfish." He's meeting the Oba today. Can't have crayfish teeth. He swaps it for a porridge with more breath-friendly ingredients. Priorities. This room buzzes with quiet power. Not because the stewards are powerful, but because they predict power, what foods will help it flow, what details might block it. He's had 3 dreams about fire this week, one says, rejecting a spicy yam mash. Let's go with plantain and honey. Cool the spirit. Some of this sounds like superstition, sure. But it's also early behavioral science. These men are human calendars, therapists, and dietitians wrapped into one. One records how often his lord eats fermented locust beans, tracking bowel patterns like an ancient Fitbit. And now, you follow one such steward down a passage lined with murals of past feasts, long-necked goblets, fish as big as boats, yams that resemble curled-up lions. The images shimmer slightly in the heat. He turns into a shaded portico, where the breakfast will soon be served. The air is different here, lighter, charged with the hush before ceremony. Woven mats have been laid. Bronze dishes gleam. Attendants light bundles of scented herbs, wafting slow smoke around the seating area. It's more like a temple than a dining room. But make no mistake, this is about appetite. One by one, the nobles arrive. Not all together, staggered, like stars blinking on. The younger ones wear crisp wrappers and decorative beads around their wrists and ankles. The elder ones arrive slowly, robed in layers that make sitting down a 5-minute operation. And then there's you, well, not you exactly. But let's imagine for a moment that you are someone. A middling noble. Not quite a big deal, but respected enough to dine in this courtyard. You lower yourself onto your woven mat. An attendant adjusts your wrapper so it folds just right over your ankles. Another fans you gently, not because it's hot, but because still air during breakfast is considered lazy air. You don't want to be seen breathing lazy air. Your steward appears with a covered tray. He kneels, offers the tray with 2 hands, and says nothing. Words before the first bite are considered presumptuous. You lift the lid. On your brass plate, a small pile of roasted yam slices dusted with a powder that smells like toasted cashew, a clay cup of pepper leaf broth with bits of shredded fish, and a gourd of thick palm custard, topped with fresh coconut and a single, suspiciously perfect baobab seed. Each noble gets a slightly different spread. Elders receive porridge with bitter herbs, thought to protect memory. Warriors are served more oil and meat. Priests avoid strong spices, too noisy for the spirit world. You begin with the broth. It's not sipped like soup. It's inhaled. Slowly. The steam is part of the experience. You're told it clears the morning veil, the fog between dreams and duties. Next, the yam. Crisp on the outside, soft inside, with just a hint of smoke. You dip one slice in the palm custard. It melts almost instantly, sweet, earthy, and vaguely floral. You're not sure if it's breakfast or a small edible poem. As you eat, you listen. Conversations drift through the air like drifting leaves. One noble discusses trade with Portuguese merchants. They brought copper this time, not brass. Curious. Another gossips about a noblewoman who keeps sending coded messages via embroidered wrappers. 3 peacocks and a monkey? Either she's in love or planning a heist. You stifle a smile. Nobles are people, too. At the far end of the courtyard, a musician plays a stringed instrument, udu, it's called, its tone watery and low. The rhythm is slow, syncopated. Not dance music. More like digestion music. And here comes the fruit course. An attendant presents a carved platter of tropical fruit, pawpaw, monkey orange, tamarind, and a new arrival, pineapple. A recent import, possibly from Portuguese ships. Most nobles still call it spiky fruit, but it's catching on. You take a slice. It's sharp, sweet, and just acidic enough to make you blink once. Another noble tries it and mutters, not bad. Bit too ambitious for morning. Some breakfast habits, it turns out, never change. As the meal slows, a final ritual begins. Each noble is offered a small ceramic cube, burnt clay mixed with crushed charcoal and something called whisper bark. You're supposed to chew it briefly and then spit. Why? It removes morning lies. Nobody explains what that means. Everyone just does it. You do, too. It tastes like licorice and sadness. Then, silence. Not a heavy silence, but a warm, sleepy one. The kind that follows good food, low music, and gentle breezes. A noble leans back and murmurs something about the stars. Another just sighs. And here's the twist, nobody finishes their breakfast. Not completely. Leaving a bite or two on the plate is considered polite. It shows restraint. It also feeds the ancestors, according to one steward. They eat memory, not meat. You file that away for later. And just when you're about to rise, a soft bell chimes from within the palace. It's the signal. Breakfast is over. Time to start the day. The nobles rise slowly. Robes are adjusted. Beads are straightened. Plates are cleared by attendants who move like drifting leaves, barely touching the ground. You linger a moment longer, watching the sunlight catch the rim of a still full palm custard cup. A bird lands on the edge, pecks once, and flies off. Even the birds know where the good stuff is. Your mat's been cleared. The courtyard has emptied out. You stretch your legs slowly, feeling the pleasant heaviness of a full, ceremonial breakfast and the quiet anticipation of what comes next. Because eating, in 16th century Benin, is not just about what enters your mouth. It's also about what you do with it after. You follow a shaded path alongside the palace gardens. The dew has lifted, and dragonflies skim the tops of pond lilies like tiny airborne paddles. A breeze smells faintly of roasted kola nut, mixed with something mossy and rich. Earthy. It could be the compost heap, or it could just be the omnipresent hum of life in a city that has already been bustling for centuries. Your destination is a cluster of utility huts nestled behind an ochre wall, quiet. Humble structures. That house one of the nobility's most important morning rituals. Digesting. Yes, digestion is a thing here. A public-private, semi-sacred, semi-scientific thing. One noblewoman once declared, "A poorly digested breakfast leads to a day of scattered thoughts." People nodded. Not because they entirely agreed, but because it sounded wise, and she was known for her mango orchard. In this little pocket of post-breakfast calm, nobles slip away to their favorite digesting corners, quiet garden alcoves, shaded benches, even specially constructed stools with elevated footrests. There's a designated staring wall too. It's literally just a smooth, pale wall for reflecting and pretending you're thinking about state matters while actually just enjoying the way your yam sits. And you, noble that you are in this scenario, settle into one such nook. A servant brings you a small clay pot of owo, a mildly bitter leaf tea, brewed thin enough to look like rainwater but strong enough to coax the intestines into action. The taste is a polite punch in the face. But it works. While sipping, you glance at the courtyard beside yours. A noble is getting his ankles massaged while someone fans his upper calves with dried palm fronds. Keeps the chi from pooling, the master murmurs. There's no proof this does anything. But everyone swears by it. Then there's the poet. Every morning, this man, a cousin to someone vaguely important, shows up and quietly recites nonsense poetry while digesting. No one asked him to. No one stops him either. Today's offering, "Oh yam, quiet in the gut / you have gone nowhere, yet you've left me changed." You don't applaud. That's not the point. The point is, he tried. Across the garden, someone is composing a message to a local governor. He scratches characters into a strip of palm bark with a stylus, stopping every few words to chew roasted cola and squint. It's said that you shouldn't write while full, but also that writing on an empty stomach attracts lies. So people split the difference and write while digesting. Honestly? Seems fair. Meanwhile, your steward appears again. He bows, silently hands you a fragrant cloth to wipe your fingers, yes, again, and slips you a token carved from ivory. A spiral, barely the size of your thumb. You glance at him. A message? He nods. Your cousin says the plantain pudding gave him visions of his ancestors asking about your health. You raise an eyebrow. That's it? He shrugs. He's dramatic. Fair enough. Nearby, an older noblewoman settles onto her digestion stool. She sighs, adjusts her beaded shawl, and murmurs, "Back when we were young, a full breakfast meant dancing after." Her companion snorts. "Back when you were young, a mango was the size of a goat." Still, it's true, there was once a custom called the Lightfoot Ritual, where nobles did a slow, swaying dance after eating to keep the stomach calm. It's not really done anymore. Too much risk of tripping on one's robes and becoming an embarrassing proverb. And yet, some of the servants still hum the melody. Time moves gently here. As your tea drains and the breeze picks up, you find yourself slipping into a trance, not sleep exactly, but a focused blankness. You're aware of birds, footsteps, the distant rhythm of someone pounding yam. But none of it calls your attention fully. This is digestion. This is sacred. But of course, not all digestion is metaphysical. Eventually, someone must go. As in, go. And in 16th century Benin, the noble toilets are a marvel of understated ingenuity. Built at a remove from the palace but lined with red sandstone bricks, they are not pits but rather carefully layered compost chambers. Each noble has a preferred stall, sometimes decorated with carved panels or hung with protective charms to deflect jealous spirits. There's even a ranking. He of the East stall is code for someone with power but little humility. You take your place. There's a bowl of cleansing herbs, a wooden ladle, and a small brush made of woven fibers. The air smells neutral, not unpleasant, just faintly earthy and medicinal. Everything is designed for privacy and comfort. And here's the most curious thing, noble waste is not discarded. It's studied. Palace healers examine texture, color, even the speed at which it decomposes. Your pulse lies, one says, but your stool never does. A little graphic? Maybe. But not inaccurate. Your steward later informs you that your output was noted as sturdy, warm, and directionally encouraging. You're not entirely sure what that means. Still, you emerge refreshed. Wiped, anointed, and lightly misted with herbal water that smells like citrus bark. As you step out, you overhear two palace scribes arguing over whether the Oba's breakfast this morning was truly vegetarian. One said there were snails in the pepper soup. But snails are barely meat. Tell that to the snails. And finally, there's a moment you didn't expect. A child, barefoot, carrying a tray of empty palm cups, pauses as he sees you, then bows slightly. He says, "May your breakfast walk with you." It's a common phrase in Benin. But it catches you off guard. Not because of its meaning, wishing that your morning meal stays with you as strength, as spirit, but because of the quiet sincerity in his voice. And for a moment, you feel it. That warm hum inside. That sense that food is more than nutrition. It's memory. Identity. Ceremony. And maybe, a little bit of quiet power. You bow back. May yours do the same. You haven't walked far before you realize everyone in the palace compound has perked up. The warm post-breakfast lull has given way to a different sort of energy. Couriers scurry like beetles along the corridors. Someone's beating a ceremonial drum in a lazy pattern, more rhythmic than urgent, but still enough to make your bones vibrate. You pause beneath a carved wooden awning. The courtyard tiles shimmer slightly in the heat. Somewhere nearby, someone is oiling their beard with crushed melon seed. Another noblewoman is carefully removing breakfast stains from her wrapper with chewed kolo bark. And then you remember, it's market visit day. Once or twice a moon cycle, nobles, especially the younger, less politically tethered ones, leave the comfort of palace dining for the controlled chaos of the Oba's private market. Not the great public market where commoners haggle over dried fish and woven sandals, but a curated stretch of stalls permitted to operate just outside the palace walls. It's a hybrid space, half showcase, half sensory theater. And yes, food is the main attraction. You, of course, are not required to go. But you feel the tug. Curiosity. The possibility of flavors you didn't get on your breakfast tray this morning. And the gentle rumor that a rare honey, collected from bees that feed only on ironwood blossoms, is finally back in season. You stroll past the outer palace guards. They nod, adjusting their sashes in silent greeting. Their spears glint, polished and ceremonial, but you notice they still carry little gourds of ground cassava tucked into their belts. Just in case they get snacky. Approaching the Oba's market, the scent hits you first. Roasted cashew. Fermented locust bean. Fresh maize on charcoal. And somewhere behind it all, that subtle tang of dried bush meat, the kind that smells like old leather and mystery. Each stall is carefully appointed. A banana leaf canopy. Woven mats underfoot. The vendors are handpicked, not only for the quality of their wares but for their storytelling skills. Selling, here, is theater. You pause at a stand with a glistening pot of soup. The vendor lifts the lid dramatically. Today's special, he whispers, is pepper-stewed armadillo. You blink. Is that common? He shrugs. Only when they forget to hide. You pass, not entirely convinced that armadillo doesn't just mean whatever was unlucky last night, and move on to a basket of smoked river shrimp, tiny, crispy things that pop like popcorn between your teeth. You accept a sample and nod in appreciation. Crunchy. Salty. Just a little suspicious. Another noble beside you, a man with an eagle feather fan and an expression like he's permanently unimpressed, leans in. I heard the Oba had 20 baskets of those delivered last week. You raise an eyebrow. 20? For what? He shrugs. He was testing how long it takes shrimp to spoil if you bless them first. Did it work? No idea. They disappeared before anyone could check. Farther along the lane, you spot something rare, a food puzzle. Laid out on a lacquered mat is a spread of clay bowls, each filled with something nearly indistinguishable, green mush, brown mush, and a very confused yellow. A sign beside it says simply, "Guess the leaf." The game? Taste each one and identify the base ingredient. If you win, the vendor promises a gourd of palm wine laced with kola root. If you lose, you must carry a feathered hat around the market for an hour that says "My tongue is decorative only." You try the green one. Bitter. Familiar. Could be scent leaf. The yellow? Sweet, then oddly cooling. Maybe star apple? The brown? Oh. That's charcoal porridge. Not really a leaf, you argue, but the vendor only grins. You win 2 out of 3. He's impressed, hands over the palm wine, and quietly slips the feathered hat to the unimpressed noble beside you. Rules are rules. A small crowd has gathered now. Not around you, but around a rotund, bare-chested man beating a drum with one hand and stirring stew with the other. He chants as he works. Yam must dance with pepper, or the morning ends in silence. People clap. Someone shouts, "Tell that to my mother-in-law." And someone else replies, "Your mother-in-law is Yam." It's unclear whether that's praise or an insult. No. You're offered a sliver of boiled wild mango. Not the juicy fruit type, this one's bitter, medicinal, and used more for its digestive properties. It puckers your mouth like a tiny slap from a very polite ghost. As you chew, a vendor waves you over to her plantain display. These, she says, stroking one lovingly, grew under a talking tree. You pause. A talking tree? She nods. It told me to sell them to someone important. You glance behind you. No one. You take one. Just in case. But not all stalls are theatrical. One elderly woman sits silently behind a table of clay-wrapped spices. She doesn't smile. Doesn't call out. But every noble that passes gives her a nod. Some drop coins. One leaves a feather. You do the same. Who is she, you ask? A younger vendor leans over. She's the spice reader. If you bring her a dish, she can tell who made it, what day of the week, and whether they were in love at the time. You blink. Does she guess? No. She knows. You don't test her. Instead, you wander into the perimeter stalls, where the obscure stuff hides. Fermented crab shells crushed into powder. Cinnamon sticks brought from caravans that pass once a year. A dried root that, when steeped, tastes vaguely of goose feathers and regret. And tucked into one corner? A scroll. It's not for sale. Just unrolled and pinned to a stand. A recipe. In elegant script, it reads: plantain soaked in goat's milk. Heated on a fire of acacia bark. Stirred until silent. That's it. No seasoning. No garnish. Just stirred until silent. You stare at it for a while. Stirred until silent. It feels like a poem. Or a warning. And when you finally leave the market, hand smelling of 10 kinds of pepper and your tongue slightly numbed from all the samples, you realize something. Breakfast in Benin doesn't really end at breakfast. It continues. In digestion. In the market. In conversation. In memory. The Oba understood this. That's why nobles are encouraged to come here, to mingle, to remind themselves that food isn't just fuel, it's presence. A way of being. Back at the palace gates, the guards let you pass with a subtle sniff. Ah, one says, I smell victory. Or crayfish. You don't correct him. Instead, you step back into the palace grounds. Your stomach full, your mind spinning with spice and song, your ears still echoing with that chant. Yam must dance with pepper. Maybe it's not just a chant. Maybe it's a life philosophy. The afternoon settles over Benin City like a silk cloth slowly being draped over a drum, muting the hum, softening the light, and inviting a kind of languid quiet that only warm, well-fed nobility can truly appreciate. You find yourself reclined in a shaded colonnade, barefoot now, because shoes seem entirely too ambitious at this hour. Your fingers still smell faintly of smoked shrimp and kola bark, and your tongue is tingling in a way you're almost certain means either enlightenment or very mild pepper poisoning. Across from you, two younger nobles debate the merits of parrot stew as a breakfast dish. One argues it's too chewy. The other says it tastes like gossip and feathers, which he insists is a compliment. You smile to yourself. But deep down, there's one lingering question you haven't yet answered today. Where, exactly, did all this breakfast food come from? Sure, you've nibbled your way through plantain, yam, goat meat, melon seed sauce, freshwater snails, fermented bean paste, and half a dozen mystery broths, but what's the system that keeps it all flowing? So you rise, stretch, a very noble sort of stretch, of course, and decide to follow the path backward, from plate to pot to pantry to farm. And that's how you end up in the palace kitchens. Or rather, hovering respectfully just outside the door of the palace kitchens. Because storming in uninvited would be like waltzing into a beehive and asking who's in charge of the honey. You wait. Eventually, someone notices you, a young cook with palm oil smudged on his tunic and a string of dried pepper pods around his neck like a necklace of very angry beads. He gives you a once-over, shrugs, and waves you by. Inside, it's chaos. But the choreographed kind. Like an orchestra warming up while actively on fire. One cook is grinding ogbono seeds with a stone mortar. Another is fanning a pot of bubbling stew while simultaneously slicing plantains with the kind of speed that makes you instinctively tuck your fingers behind your back. At least 3 children are peeling cassava. One is asleep in a basket of onions. You duck as someone walks past carrying an enormous tray of snails, still alive, by the way, and are almost bowled over by the sheer wall of aroma that greets you. Spice. Smoke. Fermented everything. A hint of fish. A whisper of lime. A background scent of roasted groundnut, just enough to make you wonder if you're hungry again, even though you absolutely shouldn't be. The head cook, a woman named Oganrio, notices you. She's stirring 3 pots at once, dictating a recipe to a scribe, and glaring at a teenage apprentice who is clearly over-roasting the maize cakes. Lost, noble? She asks, not unkindly. Curious, you reply. She gestures with a ladle. Then keep your hands to yourself and your mouth mostly closed. We're not feeding questions today. But she lets you stay. She even allows you to trail her as she works, observing how each breakfast component is prepped, timed, and distributed with the precision of a military campaign. You learn, for example, that goat meat is usually parboiled the night before, then braised slowly in a sauce of ground crayfish and pepper. That yam must be peeled carefully, lest its skin irritate the cook's fingers. That melon seeds are ground with just a bit of water, too much, and the stew loses its soul. And the best part? There's an entire room just for smoking fish. It's less of a room, really, and more of a smoke cavern. A low, dark chamber where rows of catfish hang like sleepy bats, gently stiffening in aromatic wood smoke. You step in and immediately tear up, not from sadness, but because your eyes weren't built for this much pepper air. Oganrio follows you in. This is where breakfast begins, she says. You glance at the fish. I thought breakfast began in the fields. She grins. No. Breakfast begins with what doesn't rot. It's a fair point. In a city like Benin, where heat is a constant companion and the rainy season plays havoc with fresh produce, preservation is everything. Dry it. Smoke it. Ferment it. Bury it in a calabash of pepper oil. Anything but let it spoil. And so, you learn another layer of the system. Back outside the kitchens, you find yourself speaking with an older servant. He handles inventory for the Oba's grain stores. He's seen it all. From famines to feasts. From cassava blight to yam abundance. The trick, he says, is rotation. You store enough for the season ahead. You trade for what you lack. You never trust a mango out of season. You nod solemnly, as if you've spent years grappling with mango betrayal. He chuckles. We used to eat guinea fowl eggs every morning. Then the fowl unionized. Now it's only on feast days. You're about to ask if he's joking when he hands you a ledger. It's written in an elegant script, dozens of entries showing grain quantities, smoked fish counts, dried spice totals, even dried mushroom listings from deep in the Edo forests. It reads like a love letter to food logistics. You flip to the back and see a rough map. Supply routes. Each dotted line traces a path, from outer farms to palace kitchens. From nearby river markets to the inner storage huts. From traveling traders to backdoor spice drops. This is the true web that feeds the nobles. And while the royal cooks may prepare the final dishes, it's the farmers, gatherers, foragers, and merchants who keep the pantry full. So naturally, you decide to visit a farm. Why not? You've eaten the goat. It's only polite to meet its cousin. And that's how you find yourself bouncing in a cart along a dirt path, escorted by a guard who swears he once wrestled a cassava thief into submission using only a ladle. The countryside outside Benin City is lush. The trees sway with a lazy grandeur. Birds call out names you don't recognize. Somewhere nearby, a child is shouting at a goat in what sounds like a negotiation. The farm you arrive at is a cooperative plot, run by families loyal to the palace. They grow yam, cassava, plantain, and a rotating crop of beans and squash. The head farmer, a woman with arms like tree trunks and a laugh like thunder, greets you with a mud-spattered hand. You're here to see breakfast? She asks. You nod. She laughs. Then help peel something. And suddenly, you're seated under a mango tree, slicing cassava roots while being told the intricacies of soil rotation, yam curing, and the best time of day to shout at birds. You ask her what her favorite noble breakfast is. Honestly, she says. Plain boiled yam. A little oil. A quiet morning. You nod. That sounds peaceful. It is, she replies. Until someone asks for parrot stew again. The morning light has shifted now, stretching through the woven palm fronds of your veranda in lazy golden beams, as if the sun itself is still lingering over last night's dinner conversation. You find yourself intrigued by the daily rituals surrounding drink, the liquids that slip between your fingers, the murmurs of the brewers, the humble water vessels carried with equal parts reverence and necessity. In the world of 16th century Benin, you quickly realize, beverages are not an afterthought. They are a vital part of breakfast, a ritual that balances flavors, soothes the throat, and, if you're lucky, offers a moment of calm amid the bustling palace life. You trudge barefoot through the palace grounds, guided by the faint, sweet scent of palm wine fermenting nearby. The air is thick with humidity, and your skin is already catching the warm sheen of early day sweat. But the promise of palm wine's slightly sour, honeyed tang keeps you moving. At the edge of a courtyard, you meet a brewer named Agosa. His hands are stained a deep amber from years of handling palm sap, and his eyes twinkle with the patience of a man who's measured time by fermentation. Palm wine, he explains, is not merely a drink. It is the morning's breath, the evening's prayer, and sometimes the answer to a long-dead question. You watch as he taps a freshly cut palm tree, collecting the sap in large clay pots. This sap, sweet and clear, is a living thing, fragile and transient. It ferments quickly, sometimes within hours, transforming into a mildly alcoholic nectar that the nobles prize for its subtle bite and complex flavors. But there's more to the story. Agosa tells you of the ritualistic importance of palm wine in the palace, how it is offered to the Oba before any meal, how the first sip is never drunk by a commoner, and how each batch carries the whispers of the forest where the palms. You remember that, historians still argue, whether the process of palm wine fermentation was originally discovered by accident or designed through trial and error, though in either case, it feels like a liquid poetry born from nature's patience. Next, Agosa invites you to taste the sap in its freshest form, still sweet and unfermented, resembling the taste of freshly crushed sugar cane, with a floral finish that reminds you of distant honeysuckle. Most people prefer it once it's fermented, he says with a grin. But the nobles sometimes drink the fresh sap when they want to wake up without the fog. You take a sip, the sweetness surprising you, followed by a refreshing coolness that settles in your chest. But what really captures your curiosity is the variety of containers used for serving drinks at breakfast. From elaborately carved, wooden cups to simple gourds wrapped in woven fibers, each vessel carries meaning and tradition. Oganrio, the head cook from the kitchens you visited earlier, had mentioned this briefly. The vessel itself can elevate the experience, shaping not only taste but also the social mood of the meal. You decide to explore this further and wander toward the craftsman's quarter of the city, where skilled artisans carve wood and weave reeds with practiced hands. One craftsman, an older man named Ade, shows you how a simple gourd cup is hollowed, smoothed, and polished until it feels cool and comforting to the touch, almost like holding a sleeping animal in your palm. He explains that some gourds are reserved for particular drinks. For example, a tall, slender cup is for palm wine, allowing the aroma to rise. A wide, shallow bowl is for water or herbal infusions. You marvel at the variety, and ask about any superstition or tradition linked to these vessels. Ade chuckles softly, "Ah, yes. We believe that a cup can carry your mood. Pour your worries out first, and the drink tastes sweeter." You raise an eyebrow but can't help smiling. On your way back, you pass through the palace gardens, where herbs like lemongrass and mint are grown specifically for breakfast infusions. A gentle breeze carries the scent, promising calm and clarity. You pause to inhale deeply, feeling the promise of a new day unfolding in the simple, aromatic steam rising from a cup. Before you settle back into the shade for your next course, you reflect on the complexity hidden in such a simple ritual. The drinks of 16th century Benin nobility are not just fluids, they are carriers of culture, history, and a quiet joy in the ordinary. And so, as you raise your imagined cup, you think, perhaps the secret to a noble breakfast isn't just the food on the plate, but the stories held in the sips between bites. The afternoon sun begins to soften as you step into the quieter part of the palace grounds, where the noble women tend to their morning routines with a rhythm that feels both ancient and gentle. You're curious about the role of women in shaping breakfast, how their hands, stories, and subtle decisions influence the morning meal you've been savoring. You're led to a shaded pavilion, surrounded by fragrant orange blossoms and the soft chatter of ladies-in-waiting preparing for the day. The air is filled with a mix of fresh citrus, roasted grains, and the faintest hint of cinnamon, a scent that somehow feels like home even if you've never been here before. A woman named Ayabo greets you with a warm smile. She's responsible for overseeing the noblewomen's breakfast arrangements and has a quiet authority that immediately commands respect. Her eyes glint with stories that could fill an entire scroll, and she moves with the kind of grace you suspect comes from a lifetime of practice balancing household and palace duties. "You're interested in what women eat and do at breakfast," she says, "and perhaps why." You nod, eager to listen. Ayabo begins by describing the kinds of foods favored by noblewomen. Unlike the men, whose breakfasts lean heavily on proteins like smoked fish and goat meat, women often enjoy lighter fare: soft yams cooked with palm oil, fragrant herbal teas brewed from local plants, and sweet snacks made from ground nuts and honey. But it's not just about what is eaten, it's also about how. Noblewomen treat breakfast as a time for conversation, storytelling, and planning. This meal is their moment to gather, to share news from the markets, to exchange advice on family, fashion, and sometimes even politics. Ayabo invites you to sit with the group as they prepare a breakfast dish called ajadai, a cool, slightly sour pudding made from fermented corn. The preparation is a careful dance, soaking the corn, grinding it, then allowing it to ferment just enough to develop a tangy flavor that contrasts beautifully with a drizzle of honey or palm syrup. While you watch, Ayabo shares a curious fact. Historians still argue whether ajadai was a dish originally meant for the elite or if it was borrowed from common folk and adapted for noble palates. It seems food, like stories, travels and transforms. As you savor the smooth texture of ajadai, you notice the intricate body language among the women, the nods, the glances, the delicate ways they balance tradition and personal flair. It strikes you that breakfast here is as much a social ritual as it is nourishment. Ayabo explains that some noblewomen also practice early morning beauty routines during breakfast hours, applying scented oils, using crushed herbs to freshen the skin, and sometimes even chewing kola nuts to stay alert. You raise a playful eyebrow. "So breakfast is a full sensory experience?" She laughs softly. "Indeed. Food, fragrance, touch, conversation, it all feeds the soul before the day truly begins." One lady remarks on the peculiar practice of using certain leaves as natural breath fresheners after breakfast, hinting at a botanical secret garden within the palace grounds. You feel a warmth spread through you, not from the spicy dishes, but from the sense of connection to these women who have woven food and tradition so tightly into their mornings. Before you leave, Ayabo shares a small story passed down through generations: how a queen once requested a breakfast so delicate that it mirrored the morning dew, light, fresh, and fleeting. You smile, imagining that ethereal meal. As you walk away, you reflect on the unspoken influence noblewomen hold over breakfast's tone and taste. Their mornings are a blend of grace, practicality, and quiet power, a reminder that even in the grandest palaces, it's often the subtleties that matter most. The afternoon has settled into a soft hum as you move deeper into the intricacies of Benin's noble breakfast traditions, this time turning your attention to the unusual yet fascinating role of music and storytelling during the meal. You follow a faint melody drifting through the palace halls, guiding you toward a group of court musicians tuning their instruments, calabash rattles, wooden flutes, and the deep, resonant tones of the igba. Music, you learn, is as essential to a noble breakfast as the food itself. It provides rhythm to the morning's unfolding and acts as a gentle backdrop to conversation and reflection. You watch as a storyteller, or griot, prepares to recite tales that are centuries old, his voice weaving the past into the present with soothing cadence. The nobles gather, their voices hushed in anticipation. The griot begins, recounting legends of past obis and their heroic deeds, but with a relaxed tone that invites listeners to drift, rather than engage in excitement. You feel the gentle pull of history unfolding around you, the sense that these stories are a living thread binding generations. One quirky detail catches your attention: the use of certain musical instruments was believed to influence appetite and digestion. The soft, repetitive beats of the igba drum, for example, were said to calm the stomach and prepare it for the rich foods to come. Historians still debate whether this belief was a genuine early understanding of mind-body connections or simply a charming myth passed down through the ages. You lean back, allowing the sounds to wash over you, noticing how the melodies sync with the pace of eating, a natural lull in the palace's daily rhythm. The griot's stories shift focus occasionally, dipping into folk tales involving mythical creatures like the mischievous water spirit Mami Wada. You smile at the image of nobles pausing their meal to listen, perhaps even chuckling quietly at the familiar antics. As the music swells and fades, you glimpse the subtle gestures between diners, nods of appreciation, smiles exchanged over shared memories, the quiet communion that breakfast fosters. Before leaving the pavilion, the griot shares a final thought: in telling these stories softly, we keep the past alive and invite the future to dream. It strikes you that breakfast here is not just a meal but a gentle ceremony, where history, food, and music combine to soothe both body and soul. You step away feeling wrapped in a warm cocoon of time, sound, and flavor, ready for the final moments of your morning journey. As the morning light begins to melt into the golden haze of midday, your final steps through the palace reveal something unexpected: an open courtyard garden, tucked behind intricately carved walls, where the hum of bees blends with the low murmur of satisfaction from nobles finishing their breakfast. It's here that the aftermath of the meal unfolds, a moment you didn't expect to matter, but in Benin, even how breakfast ends holds meaning. You take a seat beneath a breadfruit tree, its limbs arching wide like a sleepy umbrella. An elder named Uwadi, a retired palace steward with an impeccable memory, settles beside you. He's been observing you for days now and finally speaks. You've seen the plates and the music and the women's laughter, he says, but you haven't seen the part where it all settles in. You nod, intrigued. Uwadi explains that nobles don't leap up from breakfast. No hasty departures, no clinking cutlery left behind. Instead, there's a ritual of digestion, literal and symbolic. He gestures to a servant pouring warm palm wine into small, earthen cups. It's slightly fermented, mildly sweet, and believed to aid in settling the stomach. This is followed by a leisurely walk through the palace garden, designed to stimulate digestion, offer contemplation, and provide a final social outlet before duties resume. You sip the wine. It's earthy and mellow, the kind of drink that slows time rather than sharpens it. The garden hums with calm energy, plumeria blossoms sway gently, and the koi in a shallow basin seem almost still. You pass a stone bench where a noble is seated with a scroll, not reading, just holding it. Sometimes, breakfast concludes with silent meditation. Other times, a casual game of ao, a wooden board with round pebbles, is set between two elders, played with more conversation than competition. Uwadi shares an unexpected tidbit: nobles sometimes composed poems after breakfast, inspired by the flavors or by a particularly well-timed musical phrase. One poem from the 16th century survives on a clay tablet: yam with oil/gentle morning fire/belly laughs under bronze light. It's not exactly Shakespeare, but it lingers in the air all the same. Historians still argue whether this slow pacing was purely cultural or if it served a deeper political purpose, giving nobles space to negotiate alliances or quietly influence palace direction without formal meetings. You follow Uwadi to a quiet pond. He tosses in a slice of ripe banana, and a turtle surfaces, blinking lazily. Even the animals have a slow breakfast, he chuckles. There's one last thing you're shown before the breakfast experience draws to a close: the cleansing ritual. Not just washing hands, but an herbal rinse with lemon leaves and mint water. It's fragrant and refreshing, and said to symbolically clear both the body and mind of heaviness before returning to the world. You follow suit, letting the coolness trickle over your palms. It feels less like cleaning and more like closure. As you prepare to leave the garden, the palace seems quieter now. The kitchen fires have gone out, the storytellers have returned to their corners, and the noble courtyards echo only with birdsong. Breakfast in 16th century Benin wasn't just about food, it was the theater of the morning, a communal ritual of flavor, memory, and dignity. You look up one last time at the mosaic of leaves above you, sunlight dappling down like flakes of warm gold. And then, gently, slowly, here comes the wind down. The sun now hangs higher in the sky, its heat softened by the slow rustle of palm leaves. The palace is quiet. The garden stills. And you've made it through the entire morning, your senses steeped in stories, spices, and sounds that stretch back centuries. Your body feels a little heavier now, the way it does after a full meal and a peaceful walk. Every step you took through the palace, every bite of yam or sip of sorghum, every whisper from a noble or storyteller, it all rests gently in the corners of your mind. No need to remember it all. That's not the point. Instead, feel the hush. Let it blanket you like soft cloth. Let your breath settle, your shoulders fall, your mind soften around the edges. You've been fed with history, rocked in the rhythm of the past. And here, at the end of breakfast in a faraway time, you find something oddly familiar. A stillness. A comfort. Maybe even a smile. So close your eyes. Let the last notes of the morning song drift away. And if you dream tonight, may it be of slow gardens, spicy dishes, and laughter echoing softly through the halls of time. End of script. Sweet dreams.